Well, everybody, it's me, Santa Jeffrey the Tin Man Taylor, and welcome back to the Tin Man's Corner channel. And today I'm finishing off my Midnight Terrors marathon for you guys. And the third and final video that I picked out was 3 terrifying real Christmas horror stories, hence why I'm wearing my Santa hat today. And just to get into the Christmas mood early. So without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road in the bag. Okay, everybody, here we go.
This happened about 5 years ago when I was 22, and it's by far the scariest experience of my life. I was home from college for Christmas break, staying with my parents in the small Midwest town where I grew up. My parents live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where people leave their doors unlocked during the day and everyone knows each other's names.
Hey, that sounds like a good place for me to live in, but here's the thing. I don't trust leaving my doors unlocked when I'm gone from the house in the morning. I'm definitely locking mine. Just saying.
It felt safe, peaceful. I think that's why what happened caught me so off guard. My parents were hosting their annual Christmas party that night, a tradition they've had for as long as I can remember. It was always the same. Friends and family crammed into the house, Christmas music playing on a loop, way too much food, and lots of wine. The party would spill out into the front yard, and even the sidewalk when it got too crowded inside. I wasn't feeling very social that year. I'd just gone through a rough breakup, and honestly, I was planning to keep to myself upstairs for most of the night. But my mom guilt-tripped me into coming down to help greet guests. It was around 7 p.m. when the party was in full swing. I was standing near the entryway, sipping on some spiked cider and trying not to make awkward small talk.
I mean, I understand that this person just went through a breakup, but during the holidays, especially Christmas, you should try to enjoy yourself. Maybe you can talk to some relatives and they can kind of like help you get over it, basically.
That's when I noticed him. A man in a Santa suit was standing in the front yard, just beyond the glow of the Christmas lights. At first, I thought he might be part of the party. Maybe my mom had hired someone to surprise the kids with gifts or something. She always went overboard with the Christmas cheer. But as I watched him, I realized he wasn't interacting with anyone. He was just standing there, still as a statue, looking toward the house. I nudged my mom, who was busy chatting with one of the neighbors. "Hey, did you hire a Santa?" I asked. She frowned. "No, why?" I motioned toward the yard, but when I looked back, he was gone. "Huh. Never mind, I guess," I muttered, feeling a little uneasy. The rest of the night went on like normal, laughing, drinking, people swapping stories about the year. I tried to forget about the weird Santa guy and even started to relax a little. Around 9:30, I went outside for some fresh air. Most of the party had shifted to the back patio, so the front yard was empty. I was standing on the porch, enjoying the silence, when I noticed footprints in the snow. They weren't mine. The tracks led from the sidewalk up to the front of the house, stopping right under the living room window. I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. Someone had been standing there.
So you weren't hallucinating. There was a guy dressed up as Santa Claus right there at your front door. He's probably stalking and looking through the house just to see how many people's in there, and then when everything settles down, he might come back and probably steal some stuff in the house. You just don't know.
Watching the party through the window. I looked around but didn't see anyone. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I went back inside and locked the front door, something my parents rarely bothered to do. The party started to wind down around midnight, and most of the guests had left by then. My parents were tipsy and laughing as they cleaned up the kitchen. While I wandered upstairs to my old room, I figured I'd watch some Netflix until I fell asleep. About an hour later, I was half asleep when I heard something outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind. It had been snowing steadily all night, and sometimes the trees near my window would creak when the wind picked up. But then I heard it again, something heavier, like footsteps crunching in the snow. I sat up in bed, straining to listen. The footsteps were deliberate, moving slowly toward the house. I grabbed my phone and tiptoed to the window, trying to keep myself calm. When I pulled back the curtain just enough to peek outside, my heart nearly stopped. It was him. The man in the Santa suit was standing in the front yard again, staring up at my window. He wasn't moving, just standing there in the same spot as before, his red suit and white beard almost glowing in the dim light from the street lamps. I stepped back from the window, my heart racing. I didn't want to wake my parents. I figured they'd brush it off as someone pulling a prank, but I knew something wasn't right. I texted my best friend instead. There's a guy in a Santa suit standing in my front yard. He's been here twice tonight. What do I do? She told me to call the cops as soon as possible. I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to make a big deal out of nothing. But when I glanced back out the window, the man was closer. He was standing at the edge of the porch, his head tilted slightly like he was trying to see inside. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. The dispatcher answered, and I explained the situation as calmly as I could, trying to keep my voice steady. She told me to stay on the line while she sent an officer to check it out. "Is he still there?" she asked. I peeked through the curtain again. He was gone. I don't see him anymore, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She told me to stay inside, lock all the doors and windows, and wait for the police. About 15 minutes later, I saw the flashing red and blue lights outside. 2 officers knocked on the door, and I let them in, explaining everything that had happened. They searched the yard and the surrounding streets, but didn't find anyone. They assured me it was probably just a prankster. Maybe someone from the party trying to mess with me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more. After the cops left, I tried to go back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining that red suit standing in the snow, those dark eyes staring up at my window. Around 3 a.m., I finally drifted off. The next morning, I woke up to my mom calling my name from downstairs. "You've got to see this," she said, her voice shaky. I came down to find her standing in the living room, staring at the front door. My stomach dropped when I saw what she was pointing at. The doorknob was scratched, deep gouges in the brass like someone had been trying to force it open. My dad opened the door, and we all froze. There were more footprints in the snow, leading up to the porch. This time, they didn't stop at the window. They circled the house, pausing at every door and window, like someone had been checking for a way inside. I called the police again, and they came back to take another look. The officer who showed up was older, gruff, and clearly didn't think much of it. He said it was probably just a drunk partygoer who got confused. But then I told him about the Santa suit. His expression changed. He asked me to describe the man in detail. His height, his build, the way he'd been standing in the yard. I told him everything I could remember, and when I was done, he nodded grimly. "We've had a few reports like this recently," he said. "A man dressed as Santa has been spotted around town, watching people through their windows. We've been trying to catch him, but he always disappears before we get there." I felt sick. The officer said he'd have patrol cars circle the neighborhood for the next few nights, but there wasn't much else they could do unless he came back. He never did. To this day, I have no idea who he was or what he wanted. Maybe he really was just a creepy prankster, or maybe it was something much worse. All I know is that I still get chills every time I see a Santa suit.
Man, I don't think it's a creepy prankster wearing a Santa suit. It's probably someone that's mentally disturbed, or he was acting like a prowler and trying to find a way to get inside the house. I wouldn't consider it funny. But stuff like that would make people especially children, not only scared of Santa, but don't want to believe in him anymore because of stuff like this. But yeah, that'd be crazy. Just having a good Christmas family moment, and you see a guy dressed up as Santa outside your house. Thank God he didn't come back and rob them, though. That's just scary. One Christmas you would definitely not forget in your lifetime.
This happened on Christmas Eve when I was 16, and it's something I'll never forget. I live in a small, quiet town in upstate New York where everyone knows everyone, and crime is practically non existent. I always felt safe there, especially during the holidays when the snow would blanket the streets.
That would sound like a place for me to visit. I mean, no crime hardly up there. Sounds like a safe place to stay for sure. But yeah, New York at Christmas time, I know it's glistening with lights and decorations. Sign me up for that train ride up there. But anyway, let's continue.
But that night shattered the illusion of safety I'd always taken for granted. My parents were at a neighbor's Christmas party, and I had decided to stay home. I wasn't much for small talk, and being surrounded by adults sipping wine didn't sound appealing. Besides, I had a bunch of horror movies queued up and planned to spend the night lounging on the couch with popcorn and hot chocolate.
Me personally, I would rather watch Christmas movies around Christmas time. Now, I know they got some horror movies that are based around Christmas, but that's scary. I'd rather watch those during Halloween. But yeah, I wouldn't mind having a cup of hot chocolate on a cold winter's night.
It was snowing heavily outside, the kind of snowfall that makes everything quiet. The only sound was the occasional creak of our old house settling and the faint howl of the wind. I'd turned off most of the lights, leaving the Christmas tree glowing softly in the living room. I loved the way it made everything feel cozy. Around 10 p.m., I paused my movie to grab more popcorn from the kitchen. As I was walking back into the living room, something outside caught my eye. We have this big picture window in our living room that looks out onto the front yard. Normally, it gives a great view of the Christmas decorations, the snow-covered trees, and the road beyond. But that night, I noticed something that made me stop dead in my tracks. There was a man standing at the edge of our yard. At first, I thought maybe he was one of our neighbors or someone walking home. But he wasn't moving. He was just standing there. The snow was falling hard, and he was partially obscured, but I could make out the shape of him. A tall figure wearing a long coat and what looked like a hat. I squinted through the dim light, trying to see him better. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He just stood there, facing the house. A cold feeling crept into my stomach. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he was waiting for someone. But why would he just stand there in the snow, staring? I closed the blinds. Out of sight, out of mind, I thought. I told myself I was being paranoid and tried to go back to my movie, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease.
Yeah, I'd be feeling nervous too if I saw somebody with a long coat and a hat outside in the snow. Yeah, sure, I'd be thinking if he was lost too. But why would he be still standing there in the snow and not keep walking until he found his way that he needed to go? Or if he was a caroler, he would be with a group of people singing. So you can knock that possibility out the window.
My eyes kept drifting back to the window, half expecting to see him still there. After about 15 minutes, I decided to check. I didn't pull the blinds up completely, just peeked through one of the slats. He was closer. He was now standing halfway up the yard, closer to the house, still motionless, still staring. My heart started pounding in my chest. This wasn't normal. I grabbed my phone and texted my mom. Hey, is anyone supposed to come by the house? There's a guy outside and it's creeping me out. She didn't reply immediately, probably too busy at the party. I told myself to relax and that maybe the man was just someone passing through. but deep down, I knew that didn't make sense. I checked the window again. He was closer. This time, he was at the edge of the porch. The only thing separating us now was the front door and a thin pane of glass. I could see him more clearly now. His coat was long and black, dusted with snow, and his hat cast a shadow over most of his face. But I could see his mouth. It was stretched into this unnatural smile, too wide, like he was enjoying some sick joke that only he knew.
At this point, I'll be trying to lock everything, turn off the lights so you can hide, and call the cops to get him arrested before he decides to walk away.
I backed away from the window and locked the front door. My hands were shaking as I checked the back door and all the windows to make sure everything was locked. When I was certain the house was secure, I grabbed a kitchen knife and went into the living room, keeping my phone close. I checked the window again, terrified of what I might see. He was gone. The porch was empty. The yard was empty. He had disappeared. I felt a mix of relief and lingering dread. I kept telling myself that he had probably just moved on, but I couldn't let my guard down. I sat on the couch, clutching the knife and staring at the front door. About 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. "Sorry, sweetie. No one should be there. Lock the doors just in case. We'll be home soon." I started to type out a reply when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint, but clear. Someone tapping on the living room window. My blood ran cold. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. The blinds were still down, but I could see the faint outline of a figure standing right there on the other side of the glass. He was back. The tapping came again, louder this time. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. All I could do was stare at the window, where the outline of the man loomed. Then I heard something even worse. The doorknob rattled. He was trying to get in. I snapped out of my paralysis and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The operator answered, and I tried to keep my voice steady as I explained that someone was outside my house trying to get in. She told me to stay on the line and that officers were on their way. The tapping stopped. The doorknob went still. For a few minutes, everything was quiet, except for the sound of my breathing and the operator's calm voice in my ear. I thought maybe he'd left again. Then I heard footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, moving around the side of the house. "The police are almost there," the operator assured me. I sat frozen on the couch, gripping the knife so hard my knuckles turned white. I listened as the footsteps moved to the back of the house. Then they stopped. The back door handle rattled. I thought I was going to be sick. I whispered into the phone. "He's at the back door now. Please hurry." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw flashing red and blue lights outside. 2 police officers came to the door, and I let them in, my whole body shaking. They searched the yard and the surrounding area, but didn't find anyone. The snow had covered most of the footprints, but they could see a few leading up to the house. The officers stayed with me until my parents got home. My mom was horrified, hugging me and apologizing over and over for leaving me alone. The police said it was probably someone looking to break in, but that didn't make me feel any better. Burglars don't usually stand in the snow, staring into windows. Burglars don't smile. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadowy figure standing on the porch, grinning at me through the window. We never found out who he was. The police never caught anyone, and no similar incidents happened in our neighborhood. But every year, when Christmas Eve rolls around, I can't help but stare at the living room window and wonder if he's out there somewhere, watching, waiting.
I'm just glad that this person was all right and the police officer showed up in the nick of time, because if they didn't, who knows what that person would have done. And he says probably a burglar trying to break in, but no, a burglar would just already pick the lock and sneak in and try to steal something or kidnap the person that's in the house and not walk around trying to make it so obvious and creepy, you know? And especially not making a terrifying looking smile on their face trying to scare the person inside the house. So this guy was certainly a crazy wacko that if he got in, he probably would have done something terrible to that kid, and then the parents would be feeling guilty for the rest of their lives. All right, let's get to the final story.
This happened about 10 years ago, and to this day, I still think about it every Christmas. I was 18 at the time, living with my mom in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Our family wasn't big on the holidays after my parents' divorce, but my mom still insisted we go to a Christmas party hosted by her best friend, Karen. Karen's house was in a nicer part of town, huge, with lots of open spaces and fancy decorations. I didn't want to go at first, but my mom guilted me into it, and I figured I'd spend the night scrolling on my phone, sneaking spiked punch when the adults weren't looking. The party was just like every suburban Christmas gathering, parents drinking and laughing, their kids running wild through the house. I remember drifting between conversations, eating finger foods, and trying to avoid small talk. Eventually, I settled into a spot in the living room, scrolling through social media, while the noise of the party hummed around me. That's when I noticed him. At first, I thought he was one of Karen's guests, mid-40s, average height, dressed in a black coat and slacks. What stood out was that he wasn't talking to anyone. He was standing near the fireplace, holding an empty plastic cup, just watching. His eyes moved slowly over the room, studying people like he was looking for someone. I tried not to stare, but something about him unsettled me. He didn't have that easygoing, tipsy look most adults at the party had. He looked sharp, alert, and completely out of place. I glanced around to see if anyone else noticed him, but nobody seemed to, so I brushed it off as just one of Karen's weirder friends. About half an hour later, I was in the kitchen grabbing a soda when I noticed him again. This time, he was standing just outside the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. The party was loud, but it was quiet outside, and he was silhouetted by the snow falling behind him. I felt my stomach drop. Why was he out there? He wasn't smoking, and he wasn't talking to anyone. He was just standing in the snow, staring back into the house. I swear it felt like he was looking right at me. I quickly walked back into the living room, telling myself I was being paranoid. I even looked around for Karen to ask who he was, but I didn't see her.
I was about to say the same thing. You should have been looking for the host of the party and ask her, who is that guy? And tell her what he's doing. Because it seems like he might have just walked right on into the party without any of the other people noticing. That's a little bit creepy.
I tried to distract myself, chatting with some other teens near the staircase. That's when one of the younger kids, probably 6 or 7, came barreling down the stairs, laughing and shrieking in that way kids do when they're playing hide and seek. He dashed past us and then stopped short in the hallway. "Hey," the kid said, pointing. "Who are you?" I turned to see what he was talking about, and there he was again. The man was standing halfway up the staircase, staring down at us. I froze. His expression was completely blank. He didn't seem embarrassed or surprised to have been spotted. He just stood there, his hand resting lightly on the banister. The kid frowned, clearly unsettled too. "You're not supposed to be here," he said loudly. At this point, one of the older teens noticed and laughed nervously. "Dude, what are you doing upstairs? That's off limits." The man didn't say anything. He tilted his head slightly, as though considering something, then turned and disappeared back up the stairs. Everyone went quiet for a second, and I felt a chill go down my spine. "Who is that guy?" I whispered. "Maybe he's Karen's brother or something," someone suggested. I wasn't so sure. Karen didn't have any siblings, at least none I'd ever heard of. I decided I'd had enough of the weirdness and went to find my mom. I found her in the dining room chatting with Karen, who was refilling glasses of wine. I waited until I had her attention, then whispered, "Hey, Mom, there's some creepy guy here. He was upstairs." Karen overheard me and frowned. "What guy?" I described him. The black coat, the blank stare, the way he'd been standing on the stairs. Karen's face went pale. "There shouldn't be anyone upstairs. We only invited family and close friends." My mom tried to brush it off, saying maybe it was someone's husband or a +1, but Karen shook her head. "I know everyone who's here tonight. No one fits that description." That's when Karen's husband, Dan, overheard us and got involved. "What's going on?" Karen quickly filled him in, and Dan didn't hesitate. "I'll check it out." He went up the stairs with a couple of other guys, leaving the rest of us waiting nervously at the bottom. Minutes passed, and I could hear doors opening and closing upstairs. Finally, Dan came back down, looking irritated. "No one's up there," he said. "We checked every room." "Are you sure?" I pressed. "Because I saw him." Dan shot me an annoyed look, clearly thinking I was imagining things. "No one's up there, kid. Probably just some friend of a friend who wandered where he shouldn't." I wanted to argue, but my mom gave me a look that said, "Drop it." So I did. For a while, everything seemed normal again. The party continued and people started laughing and drinking like nothing happened. I tried to convince myself Dan was right. Maybe it really was someone's clueless +1. Then, about an hour later, one of the parents realized their little boy, Ryan, was missing. Panic set in immediately. The party screeched to a halt as everyone started searching for Ryan. We checked every room, every closet, even the backyard, but he was gone. Karen was on the verge of tears, and someone finally called the police. It felt like hours, but it was probably only 20 minutes later when Ryan was found. He was in the basement. The door to the basement had been locked all night. Karen and Dan never used it, but someone had pried it open. Ryan was sitting at the bottom of the steps, crying. When they asked him what happened, he kept saying, "The man told me to wait down here." "What man?" Karen asked, frantic. Ryan sniffled and replied, "The man in the black coat. He said he needed to find his family." My blood ran cold. The police arrived not long after. They searched the house and found the basement window open, with footprints leading out into the snow. The cops said it was probably a drifter who'd snuck in, maybe hoping to steal something. But the weirdest part? Nothing was missing. All I know is that Ryan was lucky. We all were. Because whoever that man was, he had been inside the house for hours, blending in just enough to go unnoticed, watching us. To this day, I get sick to my stomach when I think about what could have happened if Ryan hadn't been found in time.
I'll be furious if nobody didn't believe me that I saw somebody, but they take it seriously. The kid's downstairs and he says that the guy in the black coat told him to wait there. I'll be like, "Now do you believe me?" And they were thinking that it was probably one of their friends' crazy +1. Nope. He was a stranger that did not need to be there. He probably would have ended up kidnapping him. You just don't know. But anyway, that's going to be it for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those post notifications for more Midnight Terrors reactions like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Quarter channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and I said that's a wrap. Have a nice day. Have a good weekend. And Merry Christmas to you all early. Ho, ho, ho.